They said I was old, my mind slowing down. But when my daughter-in-law stood in my living room and screamed, "Pay the rent or get out," I just smiled. They didn't know the flimsy paper they waved meant nothing against files I'd prepared years ago. That night, I made tea, opened my safe, and signed a contract they couldn't imagine. I was secretly selling the house they thought they had locked down. The next morning, the knock wasn't them, it was my buyer. My name is Eleanor Hartley. I'm 62 years old, and I live in Stonebridge, Ohio. I walk a little slower than I used to, a fact my doctors are very proud of, but my eyes miss nothing. For 30 years, I was the head treasurer at the Northwood County Registrar's office. I saw every deed, every lien, every shortcut someone tried to take. I retired early, hoping for quiet. I suppose I got the opposite. This house, this small wooden bungalow, is mine, my late husband, David, and I fixed every warped floorboard. We replaced the siding ourselves, panel by panel. The backyard shed is still filled with his old tools, coated in a fine layer of sawdust I can't bring myself to wipe away. Every nail in this place holds a memory. 6 months ago, the memories got crowded. My son, Mark, and his wife, Savannah, showed up with suitcases. It was temporary, they said. Just until Mark's job restructuring settled. He'd lost his position at the software firm, and they needed a soft place to land. What softer place than with his aging mother? At first, Savannah was all sweetness and efficiency. "Oh, Eleanor, don't you worry about the kitchen. I'll take care of it," she'd say, her voice high and bright. She reorganized my pantry, alphabetizing spices I hadn't used in a decade. Then, her caring started to feel like colonization. I went to get my good china one afternoon and found a small, shiny new lock on the cabinet. "Just keeping things organized, sweetie," she chirped when I asked. "Don't want things getting mixed up." A week later, I found 2 large plastic bins in the garage, stacked near the door. They were filled with my things, my photo albums, David's collection of model cars, the Afghan my grandmother knitted. They were labeled storage in Savannah's sharp, precise handwriting. She was packing me away, piece by piece, while I was still living here. The real shift happened last Tuesday. I was sorting the mail, a thin stack of mostly junk. When I saw it, an electric bill. Not unusual, except the name on the envelope wasn't mine. It was addressed to Savannah Hartley at my address. Then I found the water bill and the gas bill. All of them switched into her name. No one had asked me. No one had told me. A cold, sharp feeling, like an icicle pressing against my spine, settled in. I had been a treasurer for 3 decades. I knew what changing utility accounts meant. It was the first step in establishing residency, in claiming control. I waited. I didn't say a word. I just cooked the pot roast I'd planned for dinner, the one Mark always loved. We sat down at the table, the 3 of us. The silence in the house had grown thick lately. Mark mostly stared at his phone, his face pale and anxious. Savannah, however, was energized. She ate quickly, a small, tight smile on her face. "Eleanor," she said, wiping her mouth with a napkin. "Mark and I have been talking." I looked at Mark. He flinched and kept staring at his mashed potatoes, pushing them around his plate. Savannah reached into her handbag and pulled out a few folded sheets of paper. She smoothed them on the table, right next to my water glass. It was a generic form, the kind you download from a website called DIY Landlord. It was a residential lease agreement. We feel it's time to formalize the living arrangements, she continued, her voice losing its sweetness, replaced by a flat, business-like tone. We're taking on the household management, the utilities, the upkeep. It's only fair that you contribute. I stared at the paper. My address was typed into the property line. Her name was listed as landlord. My name was listed as tenant. You want me to sign a lease? I said. It wasn't a question. And pay the rent, Savannah said, tapping a blank line that specified a monthly amount that made my breath catch. It's due on the 1st, just like anywhere else. Mark finally looked up, his eyes pleading. Mum, it's just, things are tight. We need to make sure. Make sure of what? Mark, I asked, my voice perfectly level. Savannah slammed her palm flat on the table, making the silverware jump. Her mask of civility evaporated. Pay the rent or get out, she yelled. The ugly words echoed in the dining room David and I had painted together. Mark visibly shrank, hunching his shoulders, his head bowed. He said nothing. I looked at her, at the raw, grasping greed in her eyes. I looked at my son, hollowed out by weakness. I felt a sudden, profound calm. The treasurer in me took over. I slowly stood up. I picked up my plate and Mark's, his food barely touched. I carried them to the kitchen, Savannah's glare burning into my back. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. As I scraped the plates into the trash, my mind was already working. The fog of grief and confusion I'd lived in since David died finally cleared. In its place was cold, hard clarity. I mentally marked down 3 things. First, paperwork. I needed all of mine. Second, witnesses. This behavior needed to be seen by someone other than me. Third, an exit. Not for me. For them. My gaze drifted across the kitchen counter, past the coffee maker, to the small, framed photo of David on the shelf. He was smiling, his arm around me at the county fair, taken 20 years ago. Next to it sat a thick, leather-bound ledger. It wasn't a photo album. It was the book I'd kept for the last 10 years of my career, the one I'd continued to maintain after I retired. The cover was simply embossed, assets and contingencies. Savannah thought she was dealing with a frail old woman. She'd forgotten who I was. After that night, the house, my house, stopped feeling like mine. It became occupied territory, and Savannah was the occupying force. She began her campaign of order immediately. The next morning, a sheet of printer paper was taped to the refrigerator. Kitchen Rules. It was titled in a bold, sterile font. It detailed approved cleaning times, food labeling requirements, and, most incredibly, a schedule for my use of the stove. Apparently, I was allotted the hours between 2 and 4 in the afternoon. More notices appeared. A new House Rules sign was posted in the hallway, limiting living room access after 7 p.m. We need our quiet time. Eleanor, Savannah explained, not looking up from her laptop. A few days later, the cable television I had paid for 20 years, was disconnected. It's an unnecessary expense, Savannah announced. We can stream everything we need. You can use our login if you ask. Mark, my son, became a ghost in his own childhood home. He was always on a call in their bedroom or running errands. When he did speak to me, his words were vague and laced with a strange, practiced pity. Mum, we're just trying to get things stabilized for you, he'd murmur, avoiding my eyes. With your finances, well, we need to be careful for your future. He started leaving pamphlets on the kitchen counter, brochures for senior financial planning and simplified living. One evening, he sat next to me on the sofa, a rare occurrence. He put his hand on mine, and it felt cold. Mum, Savannah was talking to a friend, and she said we should really consider getting a power of attorney set up. You know, just in case. An emergency medical situation. We need to be able to make decisions to protect you. I looked at his earnest, worried face, the same face that used to look at me with such trust when he was a boy. Now it was a mask for his wife's ambition. Protect me from what, Mark? I asked. Just anything, he stammered, pulling his hand back. It's just paperwork. I'll think about it, I said, turning back to the book I was reading. But I wasn't just thinking. I was acting. The small digital voice recorder I'd bought years ago for birdwatching fit perfectly in the pocket of my house dress. It was a simple click to turn it on. I started documenting. I captured Savannah's voice, sharp and impatient, from the hallway. Eleanor, the deadline for the rent is Friday. I'm not kidding. I recorded myself asking Mark, are you agreeing that I have to pay to live in my own home? And his muttered, terrible reply, it's just how it has to be for now. Mum. I even managed to capture a conversation with my neighbour. I had invited Mrs. Doyle from 2 houses down over for iced tea on the porch. A regular occurrence for us. I made sure to do it at 4:30, just as Savannah's car pulled into the driveway. Hello, Mrs. Doyle? Savannah said, not stopping. Just so you know, Eleanor's visiting hours will be changing. We're trying to manage her schedule better. Mrs. Doyle, a woman who had raised 5 boys, just blinked. Her schedule. Eleanor? Are you unwell? I'm perfectly fine, Mary, I said, pouring more tea, my hand steady. The recorder in my pocket was on. Well, Savannah huffed. I'm the landlord now, and I'm setting the rules. Mrs. Doyle's eyes met mine over the rim of her glass. She understood. I had my witness. The mail continued to be a source of information. A few days after the rent demand, another official-looking envelope arrived. It was from a county verification service. It was a notice of occupancy verification. I opened it. Savannah had filled out a form, sending it to the county, listing herself as landlord, property manager, Savannah H., and my name as current occupant. She was trying to build a paper trail, a false one, but a paper trail nonetheless. That Saturday morning, she made her next move. She was making pancakes, using my grandmother's cast-iron skillet without preheating it properly. I've been looking at our finances, she announced, and this house is a wasted asset. Mark looked up, alarmed. Savannah, we talked about this. No, Mark, I'm handling this. Eleanor, the back bedroom is just sitting there. I'm going to list it on a short-term rental platform. It'll bring in good money, help contribute to the house fund. List my guest room to strangers. The room David and I had painted blue for when Mark came home from college. I don't think that's a good idea, I said mildly. It's not your decision, she snapped. It's a business move. Later that day, Mark found me in the garden. He was holding another set of papers, different from the POA. He looked exhausted. Mom, he said, his voice low. I've got these credit card debts. Just a few. If we could just consolidate. If you could just sign these few forms, it would help me get a better rate. It's nothing, really. Just co-signing. I looked at the forms he was holding out. Oh, Mark, I said, squinting. I'm so sorry. I seem to have left my reading glasses inside, and my hands are covered in dirt. I'll have to look at them later. He sighed, defeated, and folded the papers back into his pocket. That afternoon, I waited until they both left the house to go to the hardware store. I went to my office and closed the door. I didn't call a lawyer. Not yet. I called Maggie Rhodes. Maggie and I started at the Northwood County Registrar's office on the same day in 1983. She was still there, running the titling department. Maggie, I said, my voice warm. It's Eleanor. Eleanor Hartley. How are you enjoying retirement? It's been eventful, I said. Maggie, I need a favor, a quick, quiet one. I need you to pull the deed on my property, 24 Maple Lane. There was a pause. Maggie knew me. Everything all right? L. Just doing my due diligence. I need to know the exact status. As of this minute. Is it clean? No liens, no encumbrances, nothing filed that I didn't put there myself. I'm typing it in right now, she said. I heard the clack of her keyboard. Okay, 24 Maple Lane. Title is in your name, Eleanor Hartley, and David Hartley, deceased. Sole ownership passed to you. Mortgage paid in full in 2010. Tax assessment is current. No liens, no UCC1s, no pending lease pendants. L. It's as clean as a brand new dollar bill. Why did someone try something? A profound sense of relief and a cold, hard resolve washed over me. They were sloppy. They were all noise and no substance. No, Maggie, I said, a small, genuine smile finally touching my lips. Not yet, but they're about to. I hung up the phone. I took out a small notebook from my desk drawer, the one I kept separate from the large assets ledger. On a fresh page, I wrote today's date and a single sentence. Do not argue. Let the paperwork talk. My confirmation from Maggie Rhodes was the armor. My next step was the weapon. I didn't choose one of the big, glass tower law firms downtown. I went to Laurel Street, to a small, second-floor office above a bakery. The sign on the door read, June Calder, Attorney at Law, Civil Litigation and Elder Housing Rights. June Calder was in her late 50s, with sharp eyes magnified by wire-rimmed glasses and hair pulled back so tight it looked like it hurt. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. I had paid for 1 hour, and her clock was already running. I placed my small digital recorder on her desk and played the "Pay the Rent or Get Out" clip. She listened, face impassive. I then handed her the lease Savannah had printed and the copy of the notice of occupancy Savannah had sent to the county. June pushed the papers back toward me after barely a glance. This lease is void, she said, her voice crisp. It's unenforceable garbage. You are the sole owner of record. A tenant cannot declare themselves a landlord. Any notice she issues is legally meaningless. I assumed as much, I said. But she is escalating. She is, June agreed. She tapped the recorder. You're smart. Keep this. We'll draft an affidavit of harassment based on your notes and these recordings. Your doorbell camera. Any other video you have? We add it to the file. We're building a fortress of evidence. Then, her expression hardened. Now, let's talk about what they'll try next. I've seen this play 100 times. Mrs. Hartley. The next step is a forged power of attorney or a false affidavit of tenancy filed with the court, claiming you're incapacitated. Mark mentioned a POA, I said. He's trying to get me to sign one, for medical emergencies. Of course he is, June said, with no surprise. He's weak, and she's driving. They'll try to get control of your assets, declare you unfit, and move you into a home. They will bleed you dry and sell your house. We have to move first. She swiveled to her computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. First, we neutralize the POA threat immediately. She printed a single-page document. This is a revocation of authority notice. It states that you, Eleanor Hartley, are of sound mind and that any and all previously signed powers of attorney are null and void, and no new ones are valid without your express, notarized consent confirmed by my office. I signed it. My paralegal will file this with the Northwood County Registrar by lunchtime, June said, taking the paper. It's a public filing. Anyone checking your status, any bank, any hospital, will see it. The door is closed. Good, I said. What else? Now, the house. She was back to typing, pulling records from the same county database I used to work in. I'm checking your title chain. Maggie Rhodes says it's clean, but I'm checking the history. She went silent for a full minute, staring at the screen. She clicked. Then she clicked again. A slow smile spread across her face. Well, she murmured. Mrs. Hartley, you are a very clever woman. I try to be, I said. She turned the monitor to face me. You didn't just buy this house. Last year, you moved it into a trust. The Maple Lane Land Trust, Series 14, I said. A private land trust. It's a standard asset protection strategy. It's beautiful, June said, almost admiringly. The house is no longer technically owned by Eleanor Hartley. It's owned by the trust. And who is the sole beneficiary of that trust? I am, I said. Exactly. This makes Savannah's landlord claim even more ridiculous. She's not just harassing an owner. She's harassing a legal entity she doesn't even know exists. This, she said, tapping the screen, is your ace in the hole. This is how we end it. June printed another document. This is a conditional no trespass letter. We won't serve it yet. But you mentioned she wants to rent out a room. If she posts a single online listing, this letter gets delivered, and the police will have grounds to intervene immediately for attempting to profit from a property she has no authority over. She leaned back, folding her hands on the desk. She had used 55 minutes of my hour. So, Mrs. Hartley, we have our evidence, we have our preemptive filings, and we have your ace. The question now is, what is your desired outcome? Do you just want them to leave, or do you want a lesson? One that ensures they never, ever try to do this to anyone else again. I looked at her sharp, intelligent face. I thought of the lock on my china cabinet. I thought of Mark's bowed head. I thought of David's tools, packed away in a plastic bin. Both, I said. I want both. I went back to my house with a plan. June had given me the legal framework, but I would provide the strategy. It was no longer about defense. It was about a controlled, deliberate offense. To win, I needed them to overplay their hand. I needed them to believe I was exactly what they wanted me to be, a weak, scared, and confused old woman. That evening, I found Savannah in the kitchen, wiping down counters that were already spotless. Her back was to me. "Savannah," I said. I pitched my voice a little higher, a little thinner. "About that paper, the one you gave me, the lease." She stopped, her hand pausing in midair. She turned, her eyes narrowing, sensing weakness like a shark smells blood. "What about it? Eleanor? It's just so many legal words. I'm not sure I understand all of it." I put my hand to my temple, a gesture I despised, but one that was necessary. Could you possibly email it to me? A computer copy. I wanted to ask Mr. Henderson from the church to look at it for me on Sunday. He's always so good with details." A slow, satisfied smirk spread across her face. This, to her, was capitulation. The old woman was running to the church for help. "Of course, Eleanor," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I'll send it right over. You have Mr. Henderson check it all he wants. It's just a standard agreement." The email arrived 30 seconds later. I opened it on my tablet. I didn't need Mr. Henderson. I just looked at the file's properties, the metadata, just as I'd suspected. Author Mark Hartley. Last modified by Mark Hartley. Template source DIYlandlordblog.com. They hadn't even bothered to cover their tracks. They were arrogant, and they were amateurs. The performance began. The next few days, I played the part of a woman cornered. Savannah, energized by her perceived victory, escalated her pressure. "The deadline for signing is tomorrow. Eleanor." She'd call out as I was watering my porch ferns. I just pretended I couldn't quite hear her over the sound of the water. "I mean it," she yelled from the kitchen, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "If you don't sign by 5 p.m., we'll have to move to the next step." I decided to make sure the neighbors did hear. On Friday, at 4:45 p.m., I invited Mrs. Doyle over for iced tea on the porch. We were discussing her hydrangeas when Savannah's car pulled in. She stormed up the walkway. "Eleanor, it's the deadline. I need your answer." I looked at her, then at Mrs. Doyle, and gave a small, weary sigh. "Oh, goodness. Savannah?" "Hush," I said, waving my hand dismissively. "You're being terribly loud. Can't you see I have a guest?" Mrs. Doyle took a slow sip of her tea, her eyes sharp, missing nothing. Savannah's face turned a shade of blotchy red. She spun around and went back inside, slamming the front door hard enough to rattle the frame. I had my missed deadline, and I had my witness to her aggression. That night, I made 2 quiet, critical moves. First, I had a locksmith I trusted, not one from a van, but a man who had rekeyed David's workshop 20 years ago, come and change the core lock on my small office safe. It was a 2-minute job. Second, I drove to the Northwood Credit Union. I took the original, executed documents for the Maple Lane Land Trust, Series 14, and placed them, along with David's watch and my mother's pearls, into a new safety deposit box. The house, on paper, was now empty of its most valuable secret. The safe at home now contained only decoy files, old, expired insurance policies, and copies of utility bills I'd already paid. My new doorbell camera, the one I'd had installed citing neighborhood security concerns, paid for itself at 2:16 in the morning. My phone buzzed on my nightstand with a motion alert. I watched the live feed from the darkness of my bedroom. It was Mark. He was in my office, the one he thought I was asleep across the hall from. He was quietly opening my desk drawers, his back to the door, rifling through my files. He was looking for the POA forms he'd left. He was looking for a will. He was looking for anything he could use. He found nothing of value. The camera recorded his frustrated sigh, the slump of his shoulders as he closed the last drawer. The next morning, Savannah was on her phone at the breakfast table, tapping out a text with furious energy. I was pouring coffee and saw the screen flash before she angled it away. Almost done. She was writing to someone. Serving the official notice next week. She's got nowhere to go. They were moving faster. It was time to set the final bait. I went to my desk and found a letter that had arrived that morning. It was on thick, professional letterhead, Oak and Rowan Realty. It was a printed confirmation of a scheduled property valuation. I had typed it myself. I left it sitting on the corner of the kitchen counter, half tucked under the mail basket, but perfectly visible. It took Savannah 10 minutes to see it. She snatched it up. "What is this?" she demanded, waving it at me. "Oak and Rowan. You're trying to get a valuation." I shrugged, sipping my coffee. "Just seeing what my options are, dear. If I have to, pay rent." She laughed. A short, ugly, barking sound. "Don't be stupid, Eleanor. A valuation is pointless. It doesn't matter what the house is worth. I'm the landlord. My name is on the utilities. My notice is on the fridge. You're just a tenant here, and you'll be an evicted one soon." "I see," I said, and I went to tend my roses. I watched through the kitchen window. Mark came out, and she showed him the letter. His face went pale. He immediately pulled out his phone and walked to the far end of the backyard, his voice a low, urgent murmur. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the panic. He was on the phone for a long time. When he came back, he looked sick. I didn't need to hear him. I had already noted the new, strange number he had called. After he went inside, I searched it. It was registered to a Victor Hale. A quick search of the county business registry told me all I needed to know. Victor Hale was a hard money lender. He specialized in high-interest, high-risk bridge loans. They weren't just trying to scare me. They were trying to borrow money against my house. They were planning to use their fake lease and utility bills as proof of control to get a quick, cash-out loan. That was the moment it all clicked into place. My anger, which had been a cold, simmering thing, became white-hot and perfectly still. I had planned to use June to evict them, to file the harassment complaint, get a restraining order, and have the police escort them out. It would be messy. It would be a public spectacle, and they would play the victims. No, that wasn't enough. An eviction meant they would just move on, find someone else, another parent, to leech from. I looked at the fake Oak and Rowan Realty letter. I had set the bait, and they had taken it. They thought I was worried about value. They thought I was trapped. I went to my office and pulled out the assets and contingencies ledger. I turned to a new page. I wasn't going to evict them. I was going to sell, but not in the way they thought. I wasn't going to put a sign on the lawn. I wasn't going to let them sabotage showings. I was going to sell the house right out from under them, using the one tool I had built for myself. I was going to sell the trust, and I knew exactly who to sell it to. The final blow wouldn't be an eviction notice. It would be a closing. I didn't call the fake number for Oak and Rowan Realty. That letter was smoke, a simple tool to gauge their panic. For the real transaction, I went to someone I had vetted years ago, someone I respected. I went to Talia Brooks, Talia wasn't one of the smiling, blazer-wearing agents who put their faces on shopping carts. She was a senior acquisitions broker for the Harbour and Field Cooperative, a community-based housing organisation that specialised in acquiring properties for community stabilisation. They didn't flip houses for profit. They renovated them for specific needs, like housing for veterans or transitioning families. More importantly, Talia was legendary in the county registrar's office. For one thing, she only dealt with cash buyers, and she could close a complex deal in 10 days or less. She hated drama and flipper nonsense. She was, in short, my kind of people. We met at a small, quiet table in the back of the Stonebridge Library, not an office. I didn't bring decoys. I brought the real file from my safety deposit box. June Calder called me about you, Talia said, forgoing a handshake. She was sharp, focused, and didn't look like she had time to waste. She said you had an asset protection problem and an occupant problem. They are one and the same, I said. I laid out the situation clearly. My son and his wife, the manufactured lease, the harassment, their attempt to secure a loan using fake documents. Talia frowned. This is messy, Eleanor. If you list the house for sale, they'll sabotage it. They'll refuse showings. They'll break things. A standard sale requires inspections, appraisals, financing contingencies. It takes 45 days, minimum. They could chain themselves to the furnace. I've seen it. It's not going to be a standard sale, I said. I pushed the certified copy of the certificate of trust across the table. The house, 24 Maple Lane, has not been legally owned by Eleanor Hartley for over a year. It is owned by the Maple Lane Land Trust, Series 14. Talia's eyes, which had been scanning the room, snapped to the document. She read it, then read it again. A slow look of understanding and, if I wasn't mistaken, admiration dawned on her face. You are the sole beneficial owner, she read, and the trustee has the sole power to act. I am the beneficiary, I confirmed, and I direct the trustee. So, Talia said, leaning forward, you're not selling a piece of real estate. You're assigning your beneficial interest in the trust. That's right, I said. The trust owns the house. The trust doesn't change, only the beneficiary. No public MLS listing, no sign on the lawn, no appraisals, just a private transfer of interest. Talia was silent for a full minute. That's brilliant. It bypasses them completely. Who is the buyer? You are, I said. Or rather, the Harbour and Field Cooperative is. I've read your mission. I know you're looking for a property in this neighbourhood for your veteran placement program. This house is perfect. It's sound. The bones are good. David and I built it to last. I'm prepared to sell it as is, for a fair cash price, and we close in 7 days. Talia's professional mask was firmly in place, but I could see the gears turning. A cash deal. As is, 7-day close for the vet program. That's a strong offer. Eleanor? It's the only offer, I said. My condition is that the house must be used for that program. I'm not selling my husband's work to a developer who will tear it down. I see the title is clean, she murmured, scanning the report I'd gotten from Maggie. No liens, taxes paid, but the occupants, even if the beneficial interest transfers, they are still physically in the house. My attorney, June Calder, has already prepared the necessary paperwork, I said. A notice of disposition and request for surrender, to be served to occupants without colour of title. They have no lease, no agreement, no standing. I then played my final card. But I have one non-negotiable condition for this sale, which is, I am not the one who serves that notice. I am not the one who removes them. As of the closing, I will be the former beneficiary. The new beneficiary, the cooperative, will be the party that directs the trustee to regain possession of the asset. The entity serving the papers will be the Harbour and Field Cooperative's legal team. It will be a corporate matter, not a family one. Talia looked at me. A slow, genuine smile spread across her face. You want it fast, and you want it clean, and you want the new owners to handle their own eviction, which will be infinitely more effective coming from a corporation than from their mother. They are not evicting a mother, I said. They are removing squatters. We can do this, Talia said, her voice decisive. She gathered the papers. We will establish a private escrow account. Our funds are liquid. The transfer of trust interest is a simple signatory act. They will never see it coming. The next few days, I lived a double life. In the house, I was the frail, confused Eleanor. Still thinking about the lease, asking Mark if he'd seen my glasses. Outside the house, I was a whirlwind of quiet efficiency. On Thursday afternoon, I told them I was going to a church potluck. Instead, I drove to June Calder's office. Talia was already there, along with a notary. The closing took less than 10 minutes. The cooperative's funds were confirmed in escrow. The title work was finalized. June placed one last document in front of me. The assignment of beneficial interest. I picked up the pen. I saw Savannah's face, contorted in that ugly yell. I saw Mark, staring at his shoes, letting it happen. My hand was perfectly steady. I signed my name. Talia signed hers as the agent for the cooperative. The notary stamped the page with a satisfying, final thud. It was done. I had sold the house. I drove home. I was halfway through making a casserole when Mark and Savannah came into the kitchen. Have you signed that lease? Eleanor. Savannah asked, tapping her foot. The deadline is coming up. We're serious. Oh, goodness, I said, pretending to be flustered. I'll have to look for it tomorrow. I went to bed that night in a house I no longer owned, sleeping more soundly than I had in 6 months. The knock on the door, I knew, was only days away, and it would not be for me. It was Monday, at 9:15 in the morning. I was in my kitchen, reading the newspaper. When the doorbell rang, I heard Savannah, her voice impatient, yell for Mark to get it. He opened the door to 2 people. One was a woman in a smart, professional suit from the Harbour and Field Cooperative. The other was a broad-shouldered man in a nondescript blazer holding a legal-sized envelope. He was a process server. Good morning, the woman said, her voice clear and carrying into the house. We are here representing the Harbour and Field Cooperative. We are looking for the current occupants of 24 Maple Lane. Savannah pushed Mark aside, a sarcastic smile on her face. Let me guess. You're from Oak and Rowan, Mom? Your little realtor stunt isn't working. The woman didn't flinch. I am not a realtor. Ma'am. The beneficial interest of the trust that owns this property was legally assigned last week. The cooperative is the new beneficiary. The process server stepped forward and handed the envelope to Savannah. You are hereby served with a notice to quit, in accordance with state statute. As occupants without colour of title, you have 30 days to vacate the premises. Savannah stared at the envelope. Beneficial, what, this is insane. This is my mother-in-law's house. She's elderly. You can't just... Mark, who had gone pale, finally spoke. I demand to speak to the old owner. I want to talk to my mother. Mrs. Hartley is unavailable, the woman said coolly. However, we anticipated this confusion. She nodded to the server, who produced a second packet. Here is a certified copy of the executed assignment of beneficial interest. Here is the trustee's formal acceptance of the new beneficiary. And here, she said, tapping the last page, is the closed escrow number and the disbursement record from last Thursday. Mark's hands were shaking as he took the documents. He read the dates. He saw the notary stamp. He saw the 5-figure sum that had been transferred. His face crumpled. Oh, God, Savannah. She did it. Last Thursday. She sold the house. Savannah snatched the papers. Her mind, so quick to scheme, couldn't process a defeat this total. No, she shrieked, her voice cracking. This is fraud. You're tricking an old woman. It's a forged document. I'm calling 911. She fumbled for her phone and dialed, her voice instantly shifting to a high-pitched, hysterical victim. Help. Please. Send the police. There are people here trying to steal my mother-in-law's house. They have fake papers. They're trying to commit fraud. The woman from the cooperative and the process server simply stepped back onto the public sidewalk and waited. 2 police officers arrived 10 minutes later, their expressions weary. Savannah ran to them, the picture of a woman besieged. Officers, thank God these people are trying to throw us out with these fake legal papers. The senior officer took the packet from the cooperative woman, not from Savannah. He read the first page. He read the second. He passed it to his partner. They exchanged a look. Ma'am, the officer said, handing the papers back to the representative. These documents are in order. This is a notarized, filed assignment of interest. This is a legitimate transaction. It is not fraud. It's a civil matter. But we live here, Savannah cried. This is our home. Then your dispute is with the new owners, not with us, the officer said flatly. They have given you a legal notice. We cannot interfere. As this was happening, I saw my neighbour, Mrs. Doyle, come out to water her roses, standing right by the fence line. She'd heard the whole thing. She caught the senior officer's eye. It's a shame. Officer, she said, her voice loud and clear. I've heard that young woman, Savannah, screaming for weeks, just last Tuesday. She told me she was the landlord and was raising the rent. Funny, isn't it? The officer looked at Savannah, his eyes hardening. He knew exactly what was going on. This is not a police matter, ma'am, he said to her. Have a good day. He tipped his hat to Mrs. Doyle and left. The blood drained from Savannah's face. The cooperative team gave her a polite nod and walked away. She and Mark were left standing on the porch, holding the notice. For the rest of the day, a toxic silence filled the house. I stayed in my room, listening. I heard Mark on the phone, his voice a low, desperate whisper. He was calling Victor Hale, the hard money lender. Vic, it's Mark Hartley. I know. Listen, we need that capital now. We have to fight this. What no? My name isn't on the deed. It's in a trust. Well, no. My wife's name isn't on it either. But we're the occupants. That's got to be worth. Victor, don't hang up. Victor. I heard the clatter of his phone hitting the wall. That door was closed. That night, the rage finally boiled over. I got an alert on my phone from the front porch camera. I opened the feed. The video showed Savannah, her face a mask of pure spite. She kicked open my bedroom door, grabbed the small suitcase I kept packed in my closet, and threw it onto the porch. "If you sold this house, old woman, you can sleep in it," she screamed at the door. The camera recorded every word. I downloaded the file and emailed it, without comment, to June Calder. June's reply came back in 3 minutes. "Received. Supplemental harassment complaint and request for immediate restraining order based on this action will be filed by morning." They were trapped. They had no money, no legal standing, and now a documented history of harassment. I could have let them twist for the full 30 days, but I wanted it over. I wanted it clean. I had June draft one final letter. It was an offer, a dignified exit, she called it. It stipulated that if they vacated the premises, leaving it broom clean within 10 days, I would provide $2,000 in cash for moving expenses. It was a final, honorable way out, a road they could have taken months ago. A courier delivered it the next morning. Savannah met him at the door. She tore open the envelope. She read the offer. She looked up, straight at the doorbell camera. She knew I was watching. With a look of pure, defiant hatred, she ripped the letter into tiny, tiny pieces and let them fall onto the porch. She had made her choice. She had refused the last exit. My niece, Lena Hartley, is nothing like her cousin Mark. She's 24, works as a research librarian, and possesses a mind like a steel trap. She's the one who taught me how to check the metadata on a file in the first place. When I quietly told her the full story, she didn't offer hugs or platitudes. She offered to run a search. They were trying to get a loan from Victor Hale. "Aunt Elle," she said over the phone, her voice clipped and professional. To do that, they'd need an entity to receive the funds. They're not smart enough to use a third party. I'll bet my library card they registered something under their own names. It took her less than 2 hours. "Found it," she said, calling me back. "Hartley Vantage, LLC. Registered 3 weeks ago with the Ohio Secretary of State. The filing agent is listed as Mark Hartley." "What is it for?" I asked, though I already felt the cold dread. "It's a shell, of course," Lena said. "But shells are meant to hold assets. I cross-referenced the LLC. One hit. A rental application. They were approved last week for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath luxury unit at the Riverside Lofts." The Riverside Lofts. The new glass building downtown where rents started at $4,000 a month. This wasn't the move of a family restructuring their finances. This was the final step of their heist. The LLC was the key. With that information, June's paralegal was able to look deeper into Mark's laptop data using the metadata trail he'd carelessly left on the fake lease. Tucked in a draft folder was an email, never sent, addressed to Savannah. The subject was simple, the plan. It was a bullet-pointed list. My blood ran cold as I read June's printout. Step 1. Formalize occupancy lease doc, utilities. Step 2. Secure POA use medical emergency angle. Step 3. Move Eleanor to Northwood Assisted Living intake forms attached. Step 4. Use POA and utility control to secure bridge loan via Hale, funded to Hartley Vantage LLC. Step 5. Sublease rooms at Maple Lane to local college students for cash flow. Step 6. Move to Riverside. They weren't just trying to get me out. They were planning to dump me in a state-run facility, turn my home into a flophouse, and use the equity David and I had built to fund a luxury lifestyle. And then there was Savannah's own digital trail. The texts she'd sent to her friend, the ones I'd glimpsed, were now, thanks to June, part of the record. Just need this fake lease to hold, she had written. Once she signs, she's legally a tenant, not the owner. She's old. She's scared of the law. It'll be enough to get the loan. We're almost there. I took this new, sickening file, Lena's research, the Riverside Lofts application, Mark's plan email, Savannah's texts, the audio of her pay the rent demand, and the video of her throwing my suitcase. And I sat with June. June read everything in silence. When she finished, she didn't call the civil court. She picked up her phone and dialed a direct line. Aria June Calder. I've got one. And it's gift-wrapped. Elder financial abuse. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Fraudulent conveyance and harassment. All documented. Northwood. The following morning, I met Detective Aria Monroe of the county's Elder Financial Abuse Unit. She was young, sharp, and had absolutely no patience for this kind of behavior. She reviewed the file, her expression grim. Mrs. Hartley, she said, I'm not here for the eviction. That's a civil matter the cooperative is handling. I'm here for the criminal conspiracy. You have a documented attempt to forge a landlord-tenant relationship, a threat of eviction, and a shell company set up to receive funds based on an asset they were attempting to defraud. This is a complete case. Aria began compiling her own file, separate from mine. This was no longer just about getting my house back. This was about justice. Talia Brooks, from the cooperative, added the final piece. She provided Detective Monroe with the original valuation inquiry I had made 6 months prior, the real one. It proved I had been considering my options long before Mark and Savannah arrived, demonstrating I was of sound mind and not acting impulsively under duress, as they would doubtless claim. The house was quiet. Mark and Savannah were living on borrowed time, and they didn't even know the clock was ticking. I did one last thing for myself. I called Mark's phone. I knew he wouldn't answer. He was a coward. I let it go to voicemail, and I left the only message I ever would on this. Mark, I said, my voice perfectly steady, not a tremor of anger or sadness in it. I have sold the house. The sale is final. You are not my tenants. You are trespassers. Do not make this harder on yourselves than it already is. Leave by the date on the notice. I hung up. I heard him playing the message for Savannah. Then I heard her voice, not distraught, but furious and energized. She was scrambling. I heard her screaming into her own phone. Paige Larkin, listen to me. My mother-in-law sold the house right out from under us. We live here. This is illegal, right? We can stop this. I knew the name, Paige Larkin, a notorious and notoriously expensive foreclosure defense consultant. There was a long pause. I heard Savannah's voice change, become confused. What? No, it's in a trust. She assigned. What? An assignment of beneficial interest. What does that? Paige, don't tell me that. Wait. Hello. I heard the thud of her phone hitting the sofa. Paige Larkin, like any predator, knew when a fight was unwinnable. The moment she heard the words, trust assignment, she knew it was over. The transaction was private, legal, and ironclad. They had no money. They had no legal standing. And now, they had no one left to call. With their last avenue of escape, Paige Larkin gone, they were finally, truly cornered. They had a week left on the notice. They spent it in a toxic, paralyzed silence, doing nothing, packing nothing. They seemed to believe that if they just refused to acknowledge reality, it would go away. They were wrong. On the final day before the 30-day notice expired, the woman from the Harbour and Field Cooperative, the same one from before, returned. This time, June Calder was with her. I had agreed to be present for this. I stood on my porch, and watched them walk up the path. Mark and Savannah came out of the front door, looking ragged and cornered. Savannah's eyes were red-rimmed with sleepless fury. She saw me, and her face contorted. It was her last stand. "Get off this property!" she shrieked, pointing at the cooperative representative. Then she turned on me, her voice hitting that same ugly pitch I had recorded. "And you think this is over? This is my house. Pay the rent or get out." She was still playing the only song she knew. I didn't say a word. I just raised my hand and pointed to the small, discreet, brand new sign that had been professionally installed on the porch post that morning. It was a simple, weatherproof plaque. It read, "This property is managed by the Harbour and Field Cooperative." Savannah's eyes followed my finger. She read the sign. The blood drained from her face. It was real. The cooperative representative stepped forward, holding a new document. "Mr. and Mrs. Hartley," she said, her voice devoid of all emotion. "You have failed to vacate. You have also refused a cash-for-keys offer. The cooperative is now offering a final, non-negotiable move-out agreement. You have 24 hours to sign. If you sign, we will provide one moving truck and a 5-day extension to clear your belongings, provided no damage is done to the property." Mark finally broke. He stepped forward, his hands held up in a gesture of pathetic surrender. "Please," he whispered. "Please, don't do this. We have kids. We're broke. The money for their school, it's all tied up." It was a clumsy, desperate lie. They didn't have school-aged children. It was a reference to their own debts. But he had said the word. Kids. I spoke for the first time, my voice low and cold, cutting through the morning air. "No one is evicting any children. Mark, there are no children here. The adults in this house made a choice, and now you must live with it." Savannah, seeing her husband's pathetic plea fail, snapped. She saw the suitcase I had since retrieved, the one she'd thrown on the lawn. It was sitting by my feet. With a scream of pure, animalistic rage, she lunged forward, grabbed the suitcase, and dragged it toward the curb. She tried to jam it into the city trash can. "This is where you belong, you old—" "I wouldn't do that," said a new voice. Detective Aria Monroe stepped up from the sidewalk. She had been watching. "That's destruction of personal property, Mrs. Hartley, added to the harassment complaint." The doorbell camera, I knew, had captured the entire thing. By now, the commotion had drawn an audience. Mrs. Doyle was on her porch. Mr. Henderson, the man I was supposed to have check the lease, was out walking his dog. Mrs. Doyle, seeing her moment, called out across the lawn. "It's just terrible. I remember the very day they moved in. That young woman told me she was the new landlord. Can you imagine the audacity?" The neighborhood was watching. The illusion was shattered. Mark looked at the cooperative rep, at Detective Monroe, at Mrs. Doyle, and at me. He was completely broken. He grabbed the pen from the representative. "I'll sign," God, I'll sign. Just stop. He scribbled his name on the move-out agreement. But when he passed the clipboard to Savannah, she slapped it away, sending it clattering onto the porch steps. No, she screamed. I am not signing anything. I'll see you in court. I demand an emergency hearing. I'll tell the judge what you did. June Calder, who had been silent until this very moment, stepped forward. A small, thin smile touched her lips. An emergency hearing, she said, her voice clear as a bell. That's a fascinating legal strategy. You see, Mrs. Hartley, emergency hearings are for people with a legal right to possession, a tenant with a lease, an owner with a deed. You are neither. You are a trespasser with a 30-day notice that just expired. It was the final, legal checkmate. Savannah's face was a mask of disbelief. She had no moves left. And then, as if directed by a playwright, her phone rang. It was a loud, obnoxious ringtone. She fumbled for it, her hands shaking, desperate for any lifeline. Hello, she yelled into it. Hello? What? What do you mean? Due to a review? What scandal? No, you can't. We were approved. She was listening, but the voice on the other end was clearly not waiting for her to speak. She lowered the phone, her face ashen. The Riverside Lofts, she whispered, looking at Mark. They cancelled our application. They said they heard about a scandal and are voiding the offer. Detective Monroe, having seen enough, stepped forward. Ma'am, sir, she said, addressing them both. This is the end of the line. The police are here now as a courtesy. If we are called back by the new owners to enforce a writ of possession, you will be removed in handcuffs for trespassing. This is your final notice. Despite Detective Monroe's warning, despite the signed agreement from Mark, Savannah made one last, desperate lunge. She found a legal aid lawyer willing to file an ex parte motion and emergency hearing without the other party present to stay the eviction and block the sale, claiming fraud and elder manipulation. We were summoned to the county courthouse the next morning, not for a trial, but for a 10-minute emergency hearing. Savannah and Mark sat at one table, looking dishevelled. June Calder, Talia Brooks, and I sat at the other. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Miles, looked at Savannah's filing with visible irritation. This is an emergency hearing. The petitioner, Savannah Hartley, claims the sale of 24 Maple Lane is fraudulent. The property was sold by the respondent, Eleanor Hartley, Ms. Savannah Hartley. What is your legal standing here? Are you on the deed? No, Your Honour. But are you a listed beneficiary of the trust that holds the deed? No, Savannah said, her voice small. But we live there. We were managing her affairs. And she... Judge Miles cut her off. I have the title report in front of me. The property is held by the Maple Lane Land Trust. Series 14. The beneficial interest was legally assigned to the Harbour and Field Cooperative. The escrow is closed. The funds have been disbursed. She looked at June. Does the Respondents' Counsel wish to add anything? June stood. She did not approach the bench. She stood at the table and presented her facts, one by one, like a surgeon laying out instruments. Your Honour, there was no fraud. There was only a documented campaign of harassment against my client. We have, she said, tapping a slim binder, an audio recording of the petitioner demanding rent or eviction from my client, the actual owner. We have copies of correspondence. self-declared by the petitioner, in which she names herself landlord, in an attempt to build a false paper trail. June continued, her voice never rising. We have email drafts from the petitioner's husband, Mark Hartley, outlining a plan to move Eleanor to assisted living and sublease rooms for profit. We have video evidence of the petitioner throwing my client's personal belongings onto the lawn after the notice to quit was served. The courtroom was utterly silent. Judge Miles looked back at Savannah. Her face was granite. Ms. Savannah Hartley, did you have a signed, executed lease with the former owner, Mrs. Eleanor Hartley? Savannah stared at her. This was the moment, the foundation of her entire plan. Well, Savannah stammered, I gave her one. She was supposed to sign it. So, no, the judge said, her voice flat. You had no lease. You had no right of tenancy. Talia Brooks, representing the cooperative, then stood. Your Honour, the Harbour and Field Cooperative is the recognised beneficial owner. We have served a legal 30-day notice, which has expired. We have offered a cash-for-keys agreement, which was refused. We have a draft writ of restitution here, ready for the court's signature, should the occupants fail to vacate. Wait. Mark suddenly stood up, his chair scraping. Your Honour, I was just trying to help. I set up the LLC, the Hartley Vantage one. It was just to get a deposit together for a new place. I was trying to help Mum get set up somewhere new. Judge Miles glared at him. Mr. Hartley, your attempts to help are not relevant to the matter of possession. Sit down. The judge looked at Savannah, then at Mark. The petitioner's motion is denied. The sale is valid. The new beneficiary's rights are affirmed. She then leaned forward, her gaze fixed on the two of them. I am giving you a piece of advice. The new owners have the right to a forcible writ this afternoon. I am strongly encouraging them to wait, and I am strongly encouraging you to be gone voluntarily within 72 hours. Because if the sheriff's department has to remove you, I assure you, it will not be pleasant. 72 hours, she repeated. You are done here. As she spoke, Savannah turned. She looked across the aisle, not at the judge, not at her husband, but at me. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. You'll regret this, she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper in the quiet room. You'll die alone in one of those homes. You'll see. I did not flinch. I did not look away. I met her gaze, and I gave her the truth. I regret, I said, my voice clear and carrying, letting you yell in my house for so long. Judge Miles hit the gavel. The sound cracked through the room. We are concluded. We stood. Savannah was frozen in her chair. Mark was weeping silently into his hands. We walked out into the hallway. The air felt clean. Talia Brooks, the professional mask gone, turned to me. She put out her hand. That was magnificent. Eleanor? She said. I shook her hand. It was just paperwork, I replied. The house is yours? I said. She smiled. Keys tomorrow. The 72 hours had expired. The morning of the key handover. A large, rented moving truck was parked on my lawn, not in the driveway. Its wheels had dug deep, muddy ruts into the grass David and I had spent an entire spring seeding by hand. Mark was frantically, clumsily, trying to load a sofa, but Savannah was standing on the porch, her arms crossed, her face set in a mask of defiance. She was stalling. Talia Brooks and the cooperative's representative arrived at 9 a.m. exactly. We need to discuss the terms, Savannah said immediately, blocking the walkway. Her voice was brittle. "We're entitled to a final negotiation." Talia didn't break stride. "The time for negotiation, Mrs. Hartley, ended when you refused the cash for keys offer and lost in court. You are trespassing." She stopped at the bottom step and looked at her watch. "The court-recommended grace period is over. The cooperative's offer to fund this truck was contingent on your peaceful departure. Any delay, any damage, any further stalling, and that offer is revoked, and we call the sheriff to enforce the writ of restitution. You have 60 minutes to be off this property. That clock," she said, tapping her watch, "has started." Mark came stumbling down the porch steps, his face pale and slick with sweat. He was holding the original set of house keys. His hand was shaking so badly they rattled. "Mom," he whispered, holding them out to me, an offering of surrender. Before I could take them, Savannah lunged. She snatched the keys from his hand. "No," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "She doesn't get them if we can't have this house." Then she reared her arm back, aiming to throw the keys as far as she could, perhaps onto the roof or into the street drain. She was fast, but I was ready. I moved, grabbing her wrist before she could throw. My grip was steel. She gasped, shocked at the strength, and tried to pull away. I just held on. In my other hand, I lifted the small black remote I kept in my pocket, the remote for my doorbell camera. I pressed the large red panic button. Instantly, a deafening siren split the morning air, and a loud, recorded voice boomed from the porch. "You are currently being recorded. Law enforcement is being notified." Savannah froze. All up and down the street, neighbors' doors opened. Mrs. Doyle was on her porch, watching intently. "Let go of the keys, Savannah," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise of the alarm, which I now shut off. "That's excellent advice." Detective Aria Monroe stepped out from her unmarked car, parked just across the street. She had been waiting. She walked calmly up the path, ignoring Savannah, who was still locked in my grasp. Aria held up a small, white, carbon copy slip. "Mrs. Hartley," she said to Savannah, "this is your receipt. The harassment complaint has been formally received by the prosecutor's office. We are not making an arrest today. However, if you damage this property, including throwing those keys, it will be considered willful destruction and a new charge. I strongly suggest you place them on the porch." Savannah's face was a mottled canvas of rage and defeat. Her fight was gone. She opened her hand. The keys, my keys, clattered onto the porch step. Talia stepped past her and picked them up. She walked to the porch post, where she calmly hung a small, new, laminated plaque. It was simple, professional. "Upcoming renovation. This property is the future home of the Stonebridge Veteran Family Placement Program." Savannah read the sign. If she had been pale before, she was chalk now. This was the final, unthinkable humiliation. The house she felt entitled to, the one she'd tried to steal, wasn't just sold, it was being given to people she would consider beneath her. She looked utterly, finally, empty. I turned away from her. I left them on the lawn. I walked back into my house, my empty house, for the last time. I went to the kitchen, from my purse. I pulled the one last piece of paper I had brought with me, the certified, finalized escrow receipt, confirming the funds were transferred and the sale was complete. I placed it in the center of the clean kitchen counter. A final period. Mark had followed me in, a ghost in his own memory. He stood in the doorway, looking at the empty room where he had eaten breakfast as a child. He looked at the escrow receipt. "Mom," he whispered, his voice broken. You really sold the house." I looked at my son, at this hollowed-out man who had let this happen. "I sold what belonged to me, Mark," I said, "before you and your wife sold me." He had nothing to say. He turned and walked out. I heard the truck doors slam. The engine roared to life, spitting gravel and mud as it pulled off the lawn. I watched it drive down Maple Lane. Savannah was in the passenger seat, her face pressed to the glass, looking back. For the first time since she had entered my life, she was completely silent. I walked back out onto the porch. Talia and June were waiting for me. Talia was taking down the old, faded, "sold" sign. She handed the new set of keys, the ones Savannah had dropped, to the waiting cooperative representative. The transaction was complete. My hands were empty. I had finished the game. Thank you all for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, give this video a like, and support us by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.